to Lifestyle Pirates with Big J and Adriano in partnership with Bio Australia.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to episode 81 of Lifestyle Pirates with me, Big J, and him,
Buongiorno,
Adriano. And you're right to speak Italian, mate, because you're back from your annual leave, sabbatical. I mean, I've even had people reach out saying, has he moved to Italy? He's not been around for a long time, and I'm watching him on social media.
My heart is there. My physical body's here.
Yeah. Well, when you came back, your physical body was there as well.
Yeah, definitely. A little bit too much physical body.
But you had a good time?
Yeah. Went from 89 to 103, mate. You tell me.
I'm not talking to you. You're no longer in the SONT Club.
No, I'm back down to 93
no longer
now.
In the SONT Club, mate. Well, on this episode, we are joined by Miriam Wood of Miriam Wood Coaching. Welcome.
Thanks for coming on.
How are we, Mim?
Good. So much going on in the world of men.
Well, I think this episode's quite timely because next week on the 19th of November is actually International Men's Day. Now, I didn't know anything like that existed. So we're definitely going to talk about that. But I think before we jump into that, I want to give our audience, our listeners, a bit of a sense for who Miriam is. You're wearing a Last Night a DJ Saved My Life t-shirt.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So what should our audience know about you before we start on what you do now?
So for the audience who doesn't know who I am, I'm a men's coach, and I guess I'm a bit of a novelty at the moment because I'm a female men's coach. And most people have a bit of a chuckle when I say, I just think men are wonderful. Like, I love working with guys. And I think, obviously, for the guys in the room and any guys watching this, it usually makes people feel a bit more relaxed. But I had an industry background in fitness, so in coaching, training personal trainers, writing and delivering education, and then had a very varied career. So working in nightclubs, I also ran a DJ agency for a while and taught sales. So I've worked across education, events, working with chefs, also in hospitality as well. And I guess I really started to notice a thread of what I kept seeing guys go through as well as for the guys in my life. So that's how I've ended up where I am now, from gym floors and nightclub doors to to coaching.
That's a t-shirt, Mim.
Yeah, I know, right?
Floors to nightclub doors. We're going to trademark that.
That was staged for sure.
I was thinking about it earlier. I was like, hang on, where have all my coaching conversations come from? And it's there in the moment. You know, you can have all the qualifications and all the letters after your name. But if you can't get in a really practical way and have a conversation with someone to make the difference, like, what's it worth?
I mean, going back to the whole International Men's Day, as I said, I didn't know anything like that existed. I know we have International Women's Day. Why is that a thing? Why is a men's coach a thing? I mean, you've got on your LinkedIn profile that you're empowering people at crossroads, helping them to rediscover purpose. I guess maybe tell some stories in terms of what you've experienced with, I guess, getting to where you're at, but then also maybe some of the clients you're working with as well. Because I know, having kind of navigated new career paths and speaking to you, that there's definitely a need for this kind of stuff. And the reason I laughed at gym floors and dance floors is because for me, that's a very safe, relaxed place where people would feel it's okay to have a conversation. It's not one-on-one. There's no judgment. You know, they tend to be places where it doesn't matter, you know, your color, shape, creed, whatever. It's a very equal opportunities place, right? You're there to get fit, or you're there to listen to the DJ or what have you. So maybe share some stories that you're seeing.
Well, one of the first stories actually is starting with my dad, and that was not on a gym floor or a dance floor. So my dad is nearly 80 now, and really this is the first moment that struck me, and it happened so long ago. It was in the late 90s when my dad retired, actually. He ran a fish and chip shop for 25 years, so he trained as a chef originally. And all I remember as a teenager was this really vibrant man who used to know everyone's order and was, you know, totally the guy in the village, right? And then he retired, and he went from visible to invisible overnight.
Really?
So one minute you're running a shop and everyone knows you and you sort of got that vibe going on. Next day is nothing. And I think what I've seen since then, and of course I only had the awareness as a teenager then, whereas now in my adult life, and of course talking to Dad since then, is there were just no resources. So you were supposed to feel lucky or grateful that you retired. But honestly, I think what it left a lot of men with was confusion and and a lack of identity and a lack of purpose. So, and especially in that generation, right? Often people had been one thing all their lives, whereas in our generation, people might change careers a little bit more. And he fell into a really deep depression, and he's fine now. He and Mum are doing lots of really great community stuff with mental health. But that really struck me. And then, so as I started working in fitness, and I've worked with thousands of people changing careers, changing their fitness and the conversations that I would have. And I think through that, what I call like the golden thread through those fitness stories of what I saw people doing when they wanted to change their lives, and then certainly into my corporate career as well, up until now in the past 4 years working in IT as an in-house coach, was that I saw men really, really struggle, really go through their stories in silence. And, often the running joke with women is, we can chat to each other for 30 seconds and we're talking about our menstrual cycle. It's so quick. There's a different form of connection. And I really started to notice as I was coaching men what they would open up with to me in silence. I hear things like, I've never shared this with my wife before. And I'm not talking about like weird twisted shit. I'm just talking about their fears, their financial burden, especially if it comes to having been made redundant or thinking, what's next in my career. These are things that they don't often talk to their mates about. And in fact, I was just talking to a client today, and he's, he'd probably typify that client in his 50s, been very successful at the executive level, but he really wants to do something for the next 10 years. Where he's like, I feel like I'm making a difference. Like I really want to feel like I'm making it count. And we were having a chat today, and I could just hear something. And I can't tell you, maybe it's my sixth sense, maybe it's been, coaching for a while. And I just had to call it out. And I was like, Andy, I've got to stop you. Like I can hear that you're not trusting yourself. What's going on? And so we had a bit of a chat, and as a quick summary of that, we went into some of the stuff from his past and career and family and some of those disappointments. And like on the surface, this guy, looks amazing. But what we find is through the coaching process, be it around trust or, carrying some past failures or disappointments, whatever it might be, when we carry those things into our present, it makes it really hard to move forward and create a new future, to go into a new relationship, to create a new career. So these are some of the things that I really like to work with people on. What the good thing is? It's not about sitting around in counselling for ages, like I've been in therapy for years. It doesn't have to be that way. It's about getting to the heart of what really matters, really listening to what's going on for someone. And I think for a lot of guys, and certainly with what I see, often they just haven't had a chance to talk and to really just empty out in a safe space and often get back on track really quickly.
How do these guys sort of reach out? Because coming from a man myself, being a man myself,
No way.
yeah, well, I think so. I suppose I am sort of that clinical guy that doesn't really share that information with a lot of people. I sort of bottle it up and hold it to myself as well. So, how do you find that people or men actually open up to you? Like, is it difficult to sort of crack that initial sort of force field, so to speak? And at the moment now, I don't want this to be like one of my trauma sessions again.
We're here, come on.
No, for example, now, like around the world, there seems to be a lot of hatred towards men, especially if with the US elections going on. They almost polarized it as men versus women election, which was not the case. But so at the moment now this is going to sound really weird coming from a white cisgender male that, my opinion doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But are you noticing at the moment that men are sort of standing up and wanting to unleash all of this sort of trauma that they have inside them? Or like, because at the moment now I feel men are sort of, they're not okay at the moment. All right. So how do these conversations start with you, or how do people sort of reach out? How are you finding them?
Yeah, there's a couple of things in there, and I really want to come back to what you've pointed out around men and how they're feeling, and actually I'll touch on that first. I believe, whatever the percentage is, right? Let's just say 90%. We often go to 80-20, but let's just say 90 because that has been my worldview. I see beautiful men. I see really great, integrous, powerful men, and whatever that form that looks like, right? You could be a great dad, or you might be whatever it is that you're working in. It's not about necessarily being the CEO or the leader, but I see men in all different types of work and community and family, and they're the guys that I focus on. And I kind of figure if we focus on the majority, right, the 90% that are good guys, they're trying to be good providers, good dads, good at their job, living a nice lifestyle, healthy, all of those good qualities. If we focus more on that instead of turning our attention to the percentage, the 10%, who are unfortunately, getting a lot of the attention over time, I feel like that will diminish, because if we've got guys feeling fulfilled, that guys, working through their stuff, whatever their trauma or their past might be, if we focus on that, then we diminish the rest. So I'm aware I'm only a drop in the ocean, but that is really my vision, and I do believe, happier men, happier society as well. So there's a bit of that, and certainly I've had a lot of guys say, I feel like I don't know what my role is in the world anymore. I hate the phrase toxic masculinity. I just wish that wasn't around. Really upsets me, but I'm very much I'm a woman. I love women as well, but I'm so very much focused on men, because I just don't feel like there's enough support and enough resources are making it easy for guys to reach out. So to the other point there is coaching is not necessarily about getting help. It's not necessarily about, I must be messed up or broken. If you think about sporting stars or musicians or whoever it might be, often it's like, oh, well, I'm here, I want to get to there. Or if you're in the corporate world, then it's around, you might have had executive coaching. So coaching can be about improvement in a really positive way, or it can be, all right, let's get in and sort of figure out what's holding you back so we can move you forward. But it's very much action focused, about having a plan, getting to the root or the heart of what's really going on. And that's why I think it's really positive. So if you've had experiences of counselling or therapy, and there's a place for it all, but I've certainly had some clients say, listen, I just felt like I turned up and I talked and I didn't really make any progress. So coaching also holds you accountable. And I think that's the biggest thing when you're wanting to make real progress and see results and make lasting behaviour change, be it across relationships or career. You need to have those measures in place, have a plan, having someone who's, in your corner, backing you 100%. And again, I'm aware of the sort of novelty of this. I might be the only woman in their life who's not being critical, who's not there to change them, but who's there to really support them. So I have guys reach out for career coaching, for action plans. It could be, I'm feeling a bit lost and a bit stuck. How do I move forward?
What's the sort of, not the biggest issue, what are you finding with men at the moment? Like that is their biggest struggle? And I don't know if something like a struggle needs coaching or something like that, but what's the commonalities that you're seeing across men at the moment?
Yeah, I don't know if there's one biggest one, but from commonalities perspective, I often hear the words. So if I just think about all the conversations that I've had lately, I usually hear feeling lost, stuck. What's my purpose? I hear that a lot, and I do think that's really important. I know women can be motivated by purpose. I certainly am. Like, it's really important that I make a difference and that I help people. I know that's my life's work and purpose. But I feel like that's more of a masculine thing. So a man without a purpose, I think that's where a lot of guys struggle. And it can be with changing roles in the modern workforce as well. I think we're still catching up to that. Like, our generation has seen a whole lot of changes. In our parents' generation, there might have only been a few careers that both men and women could choose from. So there's actually been a lot of change in our lifetimes. And what that means if a guy's partner is earning more money, what happens when a guy's out of work and finds himself, he's at home. There can be single parent duties. There's actually a lot that I think guys are challenged with, and part of what I want to do with men, but also with women as well, is like, how can we make it better? How can we have better conversations instead of saying, oh, men are useless? And I hear so many people saying that, they just throw it off.
Yeah, the view.
Men are useless. Yeah. It's like, what is that? Like, that's not helping anyone. So there's a few things going on for guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Recently I don't know if you know the show called The View in the US. There's, I think, 5 or 6 women that sit around and just completely barrage men. And one of the latest things, what they mention is one of the hosts from The View actually said, "Men, do we actually really need them?" Like that was how she opened up the topic. Well, it turns out they really did, because Kamala lost the vote because white men voted in maximum numbers that they've ever done before. So it turns out they actually did need men. So the irony there is quite funny.
I love how you keep coming back to politics.
Sorry, man, I'm a little bit into it at the moment.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Yep.
Mim, I think you've raised a load of. You haven't glossed over some stuff, but you've certainly raised a lot of bits there. So I do want to kind of pull you back a little bit. So I think you're right. When you said earlier on about men, they tend to identify in terms of what they do, and I think a lot of men, they've struggled to have a purpose because their main purpose in their mind, especially in older generations, has been a provider. So traditionally, the mother or the wife, has stayed at home to raise the children, while the husband has gone out to be the provider, and that's just been the kind of role. And if they enjoy their job, then that's great, right? So I think that's a challenge, because if you've had, like, for example, a banker that's been doing it for 35 years, when they get made redundant, when they have to leave, well, this is all I've done, this is all I know. What am I doing now? So they've not had the opportunity to explore other things or engage in other things. So there's a massive piece there, I think, where men have traditionally identified by what they do, rather than who they are or their purpose. And then the other piece as well that is quite interesting is, you mentioned it there as well, is that, the rise, I think, of, I don't want to use the term alpha female, but the breadwinner's not always the man in the kind of household now, because I guess women have been on a trajectory of being execs and being C-suites and earning more in some cases. And I think sometimes what that kind of looks like with some men, especially if you don't know your purpose, is, well, what do I do? And so, I guess women have been told they can have it all. You can be the mum, you can be the C-suite, you can be the exec and all that stuff. And they're actually making their way. And I guess to your point about this View program, I've never heard of it, is they're gaining momentum. But no one's really told a man now, like, what that now looks like.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that they're lost, because like, well, where do I fit? Because for generations, this has been the rhetoric, the mandate of, I'm a provider. So if I'm no longer the provider, or I'm not the provider to have a child, because a lot of women now having children on their own, what is my role? No one's really told me that. And so if you don't have a purpose, it completely makes sense why people are lost. So you got your work cut out for you.
Totally, yeah, and it's a really important one. It's so close to my heart. Both, it is a serious one, but also, I suppose, to look at some of the success stories that I've worked with in the conversations I've had with people. This stuff doesn't take a long time. Thank you. It doesn't take months or years to work through. I think even just that decision of going, oh, what if this could be different? What if it could be better? And having a conversation. So a little bit like you might go to a financial advisor who will help you sort of work through what your plans are for both what you're doing now as well as for retirement. It kind of works in a similar way. So if you put together a plan and you start executing on those steps and seeing that progress and seeing that growth, that's really exciting. Conversely, I often use the metaphor, imagine if you're standing at the foot of Mount Everest and you're like, oh, I've never climbed that, I can't do it. But you actually start doing some training and you just maybe focus on doing a hike, maybe getting to base camp and then getting to Mount Everest. It feels much easier. So I think that's what is good news, but it is a completely different paradigm and a different lens now, which is having a plan. And that's the sort of language that I use. You guys will like this about getting into the driver's seat. Sometimes you've been in the passenger seat for a little while in life and you might not realise it. And often with the clients that I see coming through, it happens when they've separated or divorced or been made redundant, like some sort of catalyst. Turning 50, that's a huge one, turning 50 or turning 60. So these milestones can actually just bring a guy to a point where he starts questioning and thinking, well, is this it? What do I want life to look like? And I've come up with an idea. I think it's mine anyway. I hope I haven't stolen it. Good. Mapping out the second act of life. And I think that's a really cool idea. Like, what is my second act? What do I want it to look like? Yeah. So whilst this is serious work, and I think it should be, and it should be taken seriously, we can also do it with a bit of fun and like raise some energy as well.
Yeah. There's a good book called The Happiness Curve, which you might enjoy. That talks a little bit of that. So what are some of the nuances? Because you mentioned kind of three pretty big catalysts there. You mentioned obviously age, relationship, and then career-wise. Maybe talk us through the difference from a process point of view, because I think personally there's a lot of trepidation around coaching. I think people don't know how to approach it. Not everybody, I think, has maybe the skill to coach as well. I think you've got to be a certain type of person. So what are what's that kind of process if someone approaches you that perhaps is post-separation, is post-divorce, or going through a hard time? What would those kind of conversations look like?
They do show up differently, but it might help if I share some stories actually from that. And one of my clients said something to me last year actually, which always stuck with me. And he said, "Just so you know, Miriam, I never came to you for help." But I found it really helpful to talk things through with someone. And so we would have very logical discussions. One of the great things about working in IT and coaching guys in IT is they're so different to me. So I rock in with curly hair talking about feelings and they're like, "No, not having it." So we'd have very programmatic coaching conversations, which is the good thing, right? So if you're thinking, again, is this going to open up cancer worms and I'm going to realise some darkness I'm not ready to deal with? That might be appropriate at some point. But I think what's really good about coaching is I have what's called a tip it out on the table session. So it's like, all right, what are we working with here? We might have some work, staff, relationship, whatever. And usually there's some overlap. It's very rare that everything is 10 out of 10 in every other area, but there's just one. So we look at what we're dealing with in a situation and then do a bit of an audit. Okay, like what's going on with your health, your finances, work, relationship, whatever it might be, and then establish some priorities. So whatever the catalyst that has brought a guy to me, then we have that sort of session, figure out what we're doing, establish the priorities, work out next steps, and then sort of begin that plan of working together. But if I tell a story, actually, one of my clients, I have to make up a name, Bob.
Classic Bob.
Mr. Smith.
Yeah.
So Bob was a CEO. He's about our age and been in the family business for a long time. But he came to the point where he was like, I don't know if I want this anymore. But his whole life, he'd had the expectation, so it's probably a bit like royal family actually, had that expectation that this was going to be his life and career. So it's like that mantle, it's a very heavy mantle of expectation and responsibility. And also that's been his identity since he was 18. And so when Bob came to me, he was really clear and he said, I need to make some decisions. I don't want to burden my wife with this. I want to move forward. I just don't know what it is yet. I've never thought my whole life about what I want, and I reckon it's time I started. And we had a really clear, logical time together where we worked through different things, and sure enough, I'm not a business coach. It's not sort of part of my game, but I help people make decisions and help them through that process so they can actually talk out what's going on. And Bob's in a really good place now. I just spoke to him the other day and feeling really good about what it is that are his next steps. And so that's just one story of, say, that part of someone's career, but someone who might have turned 50 and starting to think, well, I've ticked it all off. I've got the house and the white picket fence in some cases in Sydney. We have those. The kids are okay. Like everything's okay, but...
What now?
Yeah. Yeah, like... Is this it? I've got money in the bank. I've achieved my goals. So why do I feel so empty? And I hear that a lot. So it's about creating a new vision.
And why do they feel empty? What are some of the things that you uncover, or I guess that you've learned?
I think, and I'm sure there's a fancy neuroscience term for this. I have heard about this in sport as well. Sometimes when people achieve all the goals, and this can probably show up everywhere actually, when you can achieve a goal, you've spent so long working towards that goal, then once you get it, you need to set a new one.
Yeah.
But and so what I've heard, certainly talking to people that have been prominent in a sporting career, they've been training and training and training all their lives. And then when they retire from that career again, that emptiness can hit them. So it can come from having worked towards what your supposed goals are and you get them and you need to create new goals. Or you were living somebody else's life and expectations. A friend of mine who's also a mentor, very high profile CEO, and he was sharing, he's had amazing success, but that emptiness that he only finally looked at recently was actually going back to his dad and I think mum about putting so much pressure on him. It was sort of never enough. So that emptiness can, whether you call it intuition or something where you're just a bit out of alignment, you've been pushing towards something because actually in the back of your mind, whether you're 20 or whether you're 60, you're sort of driven by the expectations that were placed on you by your parents, and you might just not have questioned it. So there comes a point, there can come a point in everyone's life, and it will happen at different ages, where that emptiness or that sort of gnawing away at us, and I hear these real visceral words from people. I've got this thing like tapping away or gnawing or eating away at me, where they're like, I want to feel fulfilled. If I'm going to be working for the next 10, 20 years, or because we're all living so much longer now, I've got to make it count. Yeah, so it's a desire for fulfillment. It's a desire for self-knowledge, for thinking, you know what, it's now time for me. And I actually think that's really exciting.
Big time. And I think that's the thing is, unfortunately, you have to go through the darkness, for want of a better word. You've got to go through the learning to see the light, right? There's the pain before the pleasure. And sometimes I think the biggest challenge is who do you speak to? And I think I don't think it's a myth. I think most people could resonate if I talked about this, but men tend to have to be doing something to have a conversation. As you quite rightly said, women can just stop and they're there, but there's a reason men play golf and go and play snooker or go and kick a ball around or go for a beer, because they tend to have to be doing an activity or an exercise to, how are you going? Oh, I'm all right. All that kind of stuff. But that's hopefully changing the narrative a little bit.
It's really true, eh?
It is.
I never thought about that, but I was like, actually, he's bang on there.
We had the guys on from the men's table.
Yeah.
And they have those monthly catch-ups, and they're now all around Australia. They're doing fabulously well. But again, it's around activity, right? It's around a schnitty and a pint.
Yeah.
Yeah. I often take guys for a walk. It sounds like I'm putting a dog on a leash. I'm like, come on, put your ear pods in. Let's go for a walk. So whether I'm on a call or with them in person, but also because like a lot of people are sitting down, like they're just in it and quite stressed. So that also speaks to my background in the fitness industry. I'm always going to prioritize like movement and health because, to be honest, I think a lot of problems can be mitigated, not necessarily solved, by have you had enough water? How's your movement at the moment? What kind of food are you eating? Are you breathing well? There's a lot of things that we can actually quite quickly move through and get someone to a space where they're feeling more resourceful and ready to make bigger decisions. So big fan of some healthy movement and activity.
Yeah.
I find exercise really helps with my mood.
Yeah.
I have to exercise almost every day, and it sort of starts out my day. If I don't, I don't feel as good. So yeah, definitely, I think it's good for the mind.
Well, I think there's a little, and Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this, doesn't he, in terms of making your bed, going for a run, doing something for you first. What's her name? Melanie Robbins talks about high-fiving yourself in the mirror. A lot of it is...
No, that's weird.
No, mate, I did it. It's actually really useful. I did it for a long time.
High-fived yourself?
Yep.
That's just too far, for me.
Give it a go.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's fair. Horses for courses, but I just can't see myself high-fiving myself in the mirror.
Well, there is science behind it, which I'll come back to. But the first bit is just like you're winning in the morning, and then that sets the theme for the day. That's the whole piece about it. And just like there's little compounding things, right? So you make your bed every day, that's a compounding effect. You go training every day, there's compounding there, right? So it's just thinking about it that way. High-five yourself in the mirror every day, it's compounding there.
Right.
Just don't go too hard on the mirror. You know?
I didn't break a mirror, but I just cleaned it. And I was like, man, I was polishing it afterwards, which didn't have the full effect. And then I guess talk about some of the successes or some of the journeys you've seen in the. So we've spoken a little bit about, I guess, the age side of things and redefining purpose, perhaps when the kids have left. We've spoken a little bit about the new job side of things. I mean, I know I went through that, spending 18 years in one industry and I guess reluctantly moving away, trying to find my purpose again. And that was I look back at that now with a lot of gratitude in terms of going, but at the time it was tough, because there was so much that was out of your control. So there's a lot of it was taking back control and starting with yourself. What are you seeing, I guess, in that kind of relationship space? I guess especially with some people you worked with that perhaps don't have the communication skills as a natural skill set. That can be tough too.
Yeah, so I mean, from what I've seen in friends and clients and people all around me, like often, especially for those longer term relationships where, if I think of one guy, he was dating and
is this
sort
Bob
of
too?
This is Bob number 2 indeed. Yep. He was dating and working and focusing on getting a trade since he was 17, which is 17, 18, so sort of follows that normal path. And then in a 20-year marriage or so, which then dissolved, and then it's like, how do I get back on the dating scene? I haven't taken someone, what a bizarre thing, I haven't taken someone out for dinner who's not my wife in 20 years. Like, what do I even talk about? And then now there's online dating and terms like catfishing and ghosting, and anyway, so there's a whole realm of new behaviours to work through. So unfortunately there's not a silver bullet, right? That's not one book or there's not one method. There's lots of different things. And I like using this idea of Michelangelo carving the statue of David, right? It's sort of chipping away, at a block of stone to reveal the artwork underneath. So it's a number of things. It's looking at, how do I think I communicate? And then some self-awareness. How do I actually come across? It's looking at relationship styles and how we form attachment. So again, if this sounds overwhelming for anyone who's navigating and getting back into relationship land, it's actually not so bad. It all still forms an action plan. Understanding who I am, what do I want, what have I learnt from some past experiences as well. So if you found yourself both in relationships, intimate relationships, or even friendships actually, or work, experiencing the same thing over and over again, like this is a great challenge or an invitation to look at what's actually going on there. Why does this keep happening, and what am I going to do about it as well? And if I think about, actually I've got a client, Bob number 3, and we were talking about him getting back into the dating game. So he's been divorced twice, he's in his 60s, and he just reached out. Bizarrely, some people find me on LinkedIn or however they come across me, and he said, I've been thinking about this for years, probably a few years too long, but I really want to find love again, but I don't know how. And so we've been working on a plan. And what I realised, and I think maybe some guys will identify with this, is if you're just going between work and the pub, and I asked him, what kind of conversations are you having at the pub? And you can probably guess they were pretty standard pub conversations. So isn't it bizarre though? You can meet up with people every Wednesday or Thursday night for 15, 20 years and never go deep. But it sounds like that's what some guys are experiencing. So that desire to have depth and connection, variety and adventure. So Bob number 3 and I have been working on a plan for him to kind of come alive and find himself interesting again, because it's pretty hard to expect someone else to find you interesting if you don't find yourself interesting, and to meet that right person somewhere between home and the pub. But it's a plan. You know what? It's an absolute plan. Where am I? Where do I want to get to? And have a bit of fun with it.
Yeah, the pub is the escapism though. You go there, you don't want to go through, you don't want to unpack all that shit. You want to just go there, have a pub and forget about everything. Just chill out with your mates. That's why I think, the pub, you don't, to your point that you made before, you need to be doing something to talk about things, but sometimes you just don't want to talk about some things, you just want to go down to the pub, have a pint, just talk cod shit, and that's it. You know, so I'm aligning with Bob 3. I understand where he's coming from.
Right.
No, and I think there's a time and a place.
Yeah,
you know, you don't always have to have a DNM all the time. I think what I would like to see is vulnerability being cool. I think people that are vulnerable should be applauded, and you know, because I think when people look at therapy or coaching, they think they're broken. Yet we've spoken about going to the gym every day. That doesn't mean we're broken. It means we're trying to better ourselves from a health point of view. So having coaching or therapy doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're trying to better yourself, or you're trying to get to a certain level. So we need to reframe, I think, what therapy and coaching is. And then there's an element there of being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because you've actually got to stop, pause, and think a little bit more and have those conversations. And I think if we're allowing vulnerability to be cool, then you'll have more of those little compounding conversations that Mim spoke about. So you won't want to go to the pub. You don't have to have a D&M all the time, but you can just go, oh, mate, how you going with that thing we spoke about last week? Yeah, going all right. Sweet. It's just that little but it's that little check-in. Yeah. You know? That should be the new modus operandi, in the same way that, as you joked about at the start, Mim, women have traditionally done.
Yeah, I don't know how to touch on that, to be honest, because I know you're a big person of opening up and having conversations and trying to pull feelings out of someone. But I'll be honest, sometimes I don't want to talk about anything. You know, sometimes I just want to have a night where I just switch off and just chill with a mate, you know. I don't want to go into all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, the vulnerability piece can, you know, I'm okay with that coming out, but I also need to respect other people's sort of not wanting to pour everything out on the table as well, John.
Yeah, I agree.
This is between you and I, by the
way. Between you and I, the guests, and everybody else. No, mate, completely agree. Yeah. But I think it's going back to Mim's earlier point in terms of, if we look at that 80-20%, if 80% of men were okay with being vulnerable, and we applauded that, then it does make for a better conversation. It does make for people living with purpose. It does make for people being happier. You know, maybe it doesn't make need for an International Men's Day. You know,
I didn't even know that was a thing. That was a day. So when is it?
19th November.
Yeah. Oh, sweet, it's coming up. What are we doing?
having a bit of pint.
And not talking about anything.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about anything. Yeah, sounds good.
I mean, it's funny you mentioned about the sports people as well. So I know a few, I guess, people that have played, you know, they've achieved a lot in their sport, and then they've transitioned into the corporate world, and they find that really, really hard, especially if it's a team sport. Because I guess with a team sport, there's one objective, and everybody kind of falls in line to achieve that objective. But obviously in a corporate world, there's agendas. There's not perhaps that one objective, or there perhaps should be, but it's different alignment there. And so a lot of the times, people that have been in the sport for a long, long time, they find it hard to transition. Have you kind of noticed that yourself?
Yeah, I think even when I was working in the fitness industry, we'd have some retired, very high-profile sports stars come in and do the personal training course. And I'd certainly notice, I don't think I quite had the skills back then because I was sort of focused on doing other stuff, but I'm like, you know, I might notice a difference in their weight, their health and their mannerisms. But I was like, oh, they're just not who we used to see on TV. So you'd see a change certainly there. And actually I was just at an event the other week with Brett Lee and Shane Watson talking about all things cricket. And Shane's really open with what he went through and some of his journey, his mindset journey, which I think is so powerful. So for someone like that to talk about both being in the game when you're going through fear of failure, or when you're just going through a really tough patch, you know, what do you do? How do you talk about it? And he's certainly done a lot of work there. So with sporting stars, not everyone can become the celebrity or the spokesperson, right? There's only so many deals to go around. So yeah, it's really hard. And again, if you're used to being sort of top of your game and training all the time, you know, it's that identity and it's that purpose piece. So I think there's a lot more work we need to do around helping helping people early on starting to think about what next. I know there are those programs in place. I know a lot of clubs are very diligent with making sure that their players have qualifications in some shape or form. But again, it's that action plan. It's, okay, you're about to leave. This is what it could be like. And then also, in addition to sport, there's also the military career as well. I know you've had Ross on your podcast talking about a similar problem. You know, what happens when you're used to having camaraderie, mateship, someone having your back, certain type of communication, giving and receiving instructions. And you know, not that I've served, but like I know enough people that have been in the armed forces, like they speak differently, they act differently. So also looking at those transitions as well, I think there's still a lot more work to be done.
It's funny, you were just talking about there, and I'm thinking actually as a sports person, because the road to the top, and because there's not many, you know, if you look at something like Formula One, how many race drivers involved? 20, right? So there are probably hundreds of thousands of people. There's probably thousands of people that could be hundreds, and then you've got 20. Just because they're at the top, that doesn't mean they're at the top of every single thing in their life. Do you know what I mean? And so
it'll be just that.
It'll just be because they've gone so narrow and deep. And it's like an exec or a CEO. Just because they're an exec or a CEO doesn't mean they know everything about everything. And so actually sometimes when you're at the top, it can be a really lonely place because you've got no one to benchmark off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You've got no one to really, I guess, use as a sounding board, especially if maybe not in your environment, because it could be for fear of, you know, oh, well, he or she actually can't really do the job. She's asking for advice. So it's quite an interesting space when you think, yeah, and I'm actually seeing this a little bit with some of the younger drivers.
It's much easier being second.
To go back to Formula One, where already the kind of media and things are already on them, and it's like, leave them. You know, they should be kind of protected in a certain way to build up that resilience and that knowledge and make the mistakes. There's an element of where you should be allowed to make mistakes. You know what I mean?
I don't think you should be allowed to make mistakes at that type of sport.
But I mean in some of the media things that are coming out now.
Yeah, media is horrible. They always fish and try and make you say the wrong thing.
Yeah,
you know, it's I don't like the media side of things, but professionally speaking about being a Formula One driver, you can't be making mistakes in that level.
Agreed. You said something interesting there. Actually, you said number 2 is being easier.
Yeah, it's always easier being number 2 because you can look up and see what he's doing to beat him. When you're number 1, you look to the left, look to the right. You got no one else to compare yourself to, so you always you're constantly fighting yourself to be better and better. You don't have a benchmark to go off. You are the benchmark. So how do you wake up the next day and go, oh, you know what? I did that flawlessly yesterday. How can I beat that again today? Whereas being number 2, you can look up and go, okay, so that's the guy I got to beat. What's he doing? I'll do something else. You know, it's a lot easier to be number 2 than it is to be number 1.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Sorry about that.
No. It's
that's why I'm a big lover of Toto Wolff. How, you know, he was at the top of his game for 8 years or many years, right? And no one could beat him. He just did something different every year, and it was just the competition just didn't know what he was doing. Now it happens to be Red Bull, but yeah, he was consistently at the top, and I was like, man, how does that guy do that every year? When he doesn't have anyone to compare himself to. All he needs to do, at the end of it, you know, Formula One regulations change all the time, right? So when they change all the time, you have to come up with something that everyone else is trying to come up with at the same time as well. But you have to come up with, you have to do it better than everyone else, but nobody knows what anyone else is doing. And to do that for like 8 to 10 years in a row and consistently just be number one, when you are the benchmark is just astronomical. So yeah, it's easier to chase than it is to be. Yeah. I think anyway.
So Mim, what are some of the I guess people that are early on, I guess, or curious about the coaching world? They might not be aware that they're unhappy or they need to talk to someone. Again, that they might have just been so good at, you know, pushing that little ick down. What are some of the things perhaps you would say to encourage people to reach out or give them the tools to be able to reach out?
Something that I do with clients actually when they start, but this for anyone watching could be a way to think about it is if you had to and I know I touched on this briefly before, if you had to look at some of the different categories of your life, like health, finances, relationship, career, and if you were to rate on a scale of 1 to 10, of 1 being shit and 10 being awesome, even just doing like a real, I guess, analysis, and again, going back to the logical here, because I hear guys like logic, if you were to look at that and you look at those scores, that can be an interesting place to start. Now, you might rate yourself an 8, and for me, an 8 might be good, an 8 might be low for you. Like, it doesn't actually matter what the score is or what it means for you, and think, well, is that enough? Is that good? Would I like to get it from an 8 to a 9, or, from an 8 to a 10? And some people are consistently very low scorers across all areas of their lives, and that could be because they're perfectionists, or that never enough fear that can chase them. So scoring those different areas of your life and how you feel about it could be a good way to then think, okay, well, if I wanted to get from here to here, knowing that what we put our mind to with a plan and with support and accountability, we can often achieve. It's identifying potentially some of those blocks that might be in the way. All of that is part of the coaching process. So that could be a good basis to analyse what's going on for you, and then decide if there's any changes that you want to make. Now, of course, you've got the choice whether you go it alone, but, we're humans, we're wired for connection. We operate in society and teams and groups. So having someone in your corner to support you, me, or even a friend or someone else, if it wasn't getting coaching, just someone who has your back and who sees what you're trying to do, who can pick you up on the days that you're not feeling great, that's going to make a big difference. So look at what it is that you'd like to even just learn about, see if there's any ways that you can improve. That could be a good place. Something that I also give to my clients and anyone who's watching this, if you're not really sure, you can just reach out, and I've got a code word, and it's pickle. You don't need to tell me what it is. It's just basically I'm in a pickle. So if anyone just sends me a DM saying pickle, I'll know that's a shit's going down and I don't know what to do about it. So you don't have to say, I need help, I'm broken,
Yeah.
I'm messed up. Just pickle.
That's a nice icebreaker as well.
And I have had people send it.
Are there people that you can't help, that can't be coached, or
Yeah. If you're not ready, you're not ready. Hey, I know that sounds really basic, but we will do anything. We will find the money. We will find the resources. Like, humans are capable of amazing things. I remember hiring a coach years ago, and this is a high performance coach. She coaches athletes, and she was recommended by a friend of mine who's an athlete. And I wasn't necessarily her ideal client, but I was so wanting to work on a couple of areas of my life that I'd had enough. I was sick of tolerating low standards in myself in a couple of key areas, and I was just willing to do anything. And so I paid the coach, the rates that she was charging athletes. And I had my skin in the game. I was motivated. I was determined. I was wanting to be held accountable. And, I made so much change over those 6 to 8 weeks that I worked with her. So it's motivation. You don't have to know how. And I think a lot of guys and women as well, we often get stuck in the how and try and solution all the things before we even got there. All I need to know from someone is that they're wanting to feel better about something or stop experiencing what they're experiencing. Either way, knowing what we want to avoid and what we want to move towards is a motivating driver. I'll work out the how, and we'll work out a plan that it's simple. But if someone is they're not really ready to achieve the result and commit to what it takes, then it's really hard to help them, because then I'm like, pulling them along.
Yeah.
It's the old, drag the horse to water. Look, the water's so lovely and refreshing. No.
and have you had that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what are some of those conversations like? Because you mentioned about the accountability side, and that's, you're showing up for your clients, and you are a big sparkly ball of energy all the time, and that must be draining for you to ask for accountability but not get it back. So how have you navigated that in the business journey? Do you just kind of go, hey, look, I think we're not a good fit, or how do you help them kind of prepare for that?
It varies depending on the person, because sometimes we make a mistake on our way there. You know, there's that graph. I don't know if anyone's seen it, where we think success is going to be the straight line, but you know, it's probably more like my hair. You know, it's sort of curly and all over the place. You know, go backwards before you go forwards. So that path can vary. I'm okay with that because it's ultimately our intent and our desire, which I look out for. Right, like okay, this didn't happen. You went off track. The wheels fell off. Whatever. All right, let's get back on track. Let's go back to the why. Simon Sinek talks about starting with the why. So sometimes a client can fall a little bit, but if they want to be on track and like, why am I doing this? You know, what am I going to see? Really stepping back into that, then that conversation's much easier. But if they're doing it because they think they should, it's somebody else's expectations, then that's much harder. So yes, there might be times where I'm like, you know what, this isn't going to work, but you know what, like I love you, I'm here for you. When you're ready, give me a buzz. When you're really, really ready, but I cannot help you, I can't get you the result. I also don't want to take someone's money if, you know, that's not working out. So I'd much rather have that conversation and say, you know what, do you think when you're ready, come back? But it's not a conversation about shame and, oh, well, I guess you just weren't good enough to achieve the goal, right? Like, I mean, that could work. Yeah. So my approach, I'm a lover. You know, I'm very much about caring for people. I'll help them along the way and be there as much as possible. Accountability has to be enforced. So someone either rises to meet that and like, yep, I'm back on, I'm ready to go. Humans are interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I take the negging, to be honest. I don't like to be told that I'm doing the right thing. I like to be told I'm doing the wrong thing. Well,
in the right circumstances.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Like to myself, like I never say Jonathan's a big guy for celebrating the wins, whereas I hate doing that. I can't stand. I hate celebrating the wins because the wins because for me it's like I don't know. It always seems a little bit like the end of something, whereas I don't want to ever finish. Like I always want to keep on, all right, next, rather than stopping, sipping the wine and enjoying it. I don't know. We're very different like that.
That sounds like your motivation strategy. Like it's quite interesting when you study motivation from a neuroscience point of view. Like we've all got different strategies of figuring something out. And of course, now I want to have a longer conversation with you about where this comes from. You know, you said always healthy.
Yeah, keep going. I want to know where this comes from.
This is actually going to be group therapy. Yeah. But, you know, we've got a strategy for how we buy. We've got a strategy of how we love. We've got a strategy of how we clean our teeth, right? We might always use the same hand to do the same thing at the same time. So there are strategies or blueprints that things happen in a certain way. So you might talk about being motivated by the carrot or the stick, and you know that is part of it. So when I work with a client, I understand their language, their beliefs, their conditioning, what they're motivated by, and I'll work with that. But it's only when I think it might be a little bit of out of balance. If that person, it's just never enough for them as well, because ultimately it can end up years down the track of that person just feeling tired because it's just never been enough and they're not enough. So it just depends on the person. Sometimes that's a really cool hunger for success.
Yeah. I like the stick, not the carrot. I've never heard that expression before.
Oh, okay.
You've never heard the carrot or the stick?
No.
Really? I suppose you're not really in sales, are you?
No. For me, it was the belt. No.
Jeez.
Sorry. Inbuilt trauma.
You're in a safe space, Adrian.
Yeah. Thank you.
So going back to
my trauma.
No, we haven't got that much time.
I brought 2 SD cards.
What does so with your business, what does Mim's Utopia look like?
Oh,
so if you could wave your magic wand on that 80% of men and so the execs, the sports people, the people that you work with, what would your utopia look like?
Oh, I'm going to have to speak from the heart on this. I mean, I always speak from the heart, but I mean, this is why I'm here. This is my soul calling and the work that I'm doing. I cannot quite explain to you why I love working with men so much. Yes, I've had sort of certain moments like, you know, what I saw with my dad and men along the way as well, but I just know this is where I'm meant to be. And I love seeing a guy, you know, sometimes we talk about the masculine and the feminine energies, and, you know, men and women can have both, but I'm talking about just the straight up masculine energy, a guy feeling good, strong body, strong mind, strong spirit, a guy in his power, feeling great, looking after the people in his life, feeling clear, having a vision. That is its own thing. That is a sight to behold. And, I'm always, I think especially in this day and age, very conscious to say, of course, a woman in her power and in her strength is also a beautiful thing as well. But there are just certain things within the masculine that I want to see more of. I want to see more guys feeling happy and on purpose and fulfilled. I think that's got an exponential benefit into society. If we think about, it's not so much in Australia, but places where we see young men, and it's usually young men, disenfranchised, they're radicalised, and we're seeing, war and destruction. It's like, I don't think that exists when you've got men feeling happy in themselves and feeling like they've got an exciting future where they can use their skills, where they can experience love and connection. So, yeah, my utopia is seeing men feeling free to explore their purpose, to know who they are, to use their skills, to experience loving relationships, friendships, romantic relationships as well, whatever their gender and their preference. I want to see women feeling happy and supporting men as well. I'm tired of the shit talk about men. It needs to go because it's not helping anyone. No one's winning out of that.
No.
So, and of course everyone knows that I love cake. So my utopia, aside from some champagne and cake, of course, is a world where I'm seeing that for guys. I just think that's a beautiful, exciting vision.
That made me feel really happy.
Well, the champagne and cake.
Yeah, of course. No, no, it's really refreshing to hear that actually, because I don't usually. Well, maybe it's just the media I consume, but yeah, that's not what I hear all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why are you laughing, John?
Because of the media you consume.
It is. Yeah.
I mean, I think I love that vision, and I think that having that vision has the trickle-down effect in terms of generations and generations and generations
Yeah.
in a big way. So I think that's very, very powerful. Mim, phenomenal. As always, thank you for coming on the show and telling us your story. But
Thank you.
I mean, what I love is that you talk about people struggling for purpose. You absolutely are crystal clear on your purpose and your vision and your why, which is super impressive.
Yeah.
If people want to get hold of you, maybe send you a DM with the word pickle. How do people reach out?
LinkedIn. I'm sure we'll have the addresses in the show notes. But LinkedIn, Instagram, miriamwood.com is my website. It's a pretty easy one to remember. So if you need those keywords to think about, it's getting an action plan. So of course you can message and just say, hey, I want to have a conversation about a plan. I want to improve in some area. I want to create some vision and ignition and momentum. Like, think about the things that you want and, let's create it.
Awesome.
Love it.
Thank you very much. All the links will be in the description as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you
Thanks,
for coming on.
guys.
And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button.
Oh,
We'll see you next time.
YouTuber. Thank you very much.